All over the world, we see people protesting against Israel and supporting Palestine. The people who protest can be divided into two groups. The first group are migrants who escaped the Middle East and do not want to live there anymore, and they decided they want to live in a civilized world. Unfortunately, they are not satisfied very long with this land that they escaped to and received haven from, and soon they want to enforce their religion on everybody and change the democratic process. So that's group number one. Group number two are mostly young people who have never been to the Middle East and think they understand the Middle East, but in fact they do not know nothing about what is happening in Israel. And the best example of this is a protest that was done recently in front of the Nova exhibit in New York. The exhibit showed the tragedy of October 7th, where hundreds of people lost their life, were injured, and lost somebody close. So, in a moment of great pain for the Jewish people, the protesters were shouting, "Free Palestine," and "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And the ironic thing about it is that the majority of the people gathered there have no idea what river and what sea are we talking about. Some of them don't even know what are they protesting. Here is a good example of that.
I've seen videos and I don't know if all these students understand exactly why they are here or if they're just joining the crowd. I want to know if they actually understand why they are protesting and see if they can give me any good answers. What are you guys out here protesting for?
No comment.
Why are you guys out here today?
Speak to the organizers.
Why can't I wanted to ask you though.
Official statements from the organizers only.
Guys chanted from the river to the sea?
Yes.
Okay, which river, which sea?
The Sea of...
So you don't know that?
No.
The answer was the Mediterranean and the Jordan.
So it looks a little bit like this parody here of two people totally disconnected from the reality and not understanding actually what are they supporting. Because if they understood it, they would know that the people they're supporting would kill them instantly for who they are. That's the irony. Okay, but let's leave this woke and naive world and actually go to the place where we can understand what is happening now in the Middle East. And to do that, we have to understand the geography and the history of Israel. And to understand the complex situation with the Palestinians, we have to understand that there are different types of Palestinians, or as I call them, Arabs. So the first group of people are the ones who live in Gaza, and they are ruled by Hamas, a terrorist organization that attacked Israel on October 7th. What many people don't know, however, is that Israel left Gaza in 2005. The Israeli government ordered all the Jewish people to leave Gaza, and those that opposed were removed by force. Israel even removed the bones of the people that were buried in Gaza. That is a clear sign they were not returning. Of course, this was a very dramatic time for the Israelis. What was left behind, however, was a whole infrastructure that was built there by the Israelis. So factories, farms, everything was available for the people, the Arab people that lived there. But instead of using this tremendous wealth that was left behind, you know what the Arabs did? They came and they burned everything. They burned the farms, they burned the greenhouses, the factories, they even killed the animals because they hated the Jews so much. But that's not all. After the total destruction of all the wealth that was left behind, the people in Gaza elected Hamas, a very radical, extremist, terrorist organization that just destroyed all opposition in Gaza. They have chosen themselves this organization. Since then, different organizations worldwide have donated billions of dollars to Gaza. And remember, this is a very small territory, smaller than the territory of the city of New York. And looking at the amount of donations that was given to Gaza, this should look like a Dubai, and yet it looks like this. There are two reasons why Gaza looked like a slum even before the war with Israel. The first reason is that the money that was supposed to go to help the people was taken by the leaders of Hamas and used for their own benefit. The leaders of Hamas are living a luxurious life in Qatar, and their personal wealth is billions of dollars. They do not care about Gaza. And how did they get so rich? Well, it's through the wonderful donations for the poor people in Gaza. And the rest of the money that was left over was used by Hamas to create weapons and rockets that were to be used against Israel. Okay, but that's just one group of people that refer to themselves as Palestinians. But as I said, that's not the only group of people who call themselves Palestinians. There are also other groups of people who claim to be Palestinians. The second group of people who also call themselves Palestinians are the ones living in the so-called West Bank. Now, I challenge you, ask any of the people protesting to explain to you why the West Bank is called the West Bank. What does it even mean? I guarantee you that a very small percentage of people will know what it means. Now, before I explain what the West Bank means, I would like to point out that the real name of this place is called Judea and Samaria. This is how this territory was known for centuries, and here we can find cities like Hebron, very important for the Jewish people. In the center of this territory is the most important city for the Jewish history, Jerusalem, right in the middle of Judea. On this map, you can now see the Temple Mount, the City of David, and the Old City of today's Jerusalem. And all those places are tremendously important for Israel's history. Jewish people cannot be separated from those places. If we move north to Samaria, we also find extremely important places for biblical history, like for example the city of Beth El. Beth El literally means from Hebrew the house of God. And so please don't call this place the West Bank, but call it Judea and Samaria. If you are a Christian, ask yourself how God was calling this place in the Bible. And no matter if we're talking about the Tanakh, the Old Testament, or the New Testament, this place in the Bible is called Judea and Samaria, and not the West Bank. Okay, but why do people call this place the West Bank? And the West Bank of what? This is a natural question, right? Well, to understand the origin of this whole mess, we actually have to go to Great Britain. Yes, Great Britain, I'm afraid you are responsible for a lot of the mess we see in the Middle East. You see, during World War I, the Central Powers were joined by the Ottoman Empire against England, France, and the Soviet Union. And you see, during that time, the Great British Empire was also controlling the territory of today's Egypt. And in Egypt, we have the Suez Canal, which was of a strategic importance to the Great Britain. Of the many colonies that the British Empire had, one of the most important was in India. And the Suez Canal enabled Great Britain of a quick shipment of goods to Great Britain. Otherwise, they would have to go around Africa. But when the Ottoman Empire joined Germany in World War I, suddenly this territory of the Sinai Peninsula and the Suez Canal were threatened by the Ottoman army. The British were of course able to repel the attacking Ottoman armies, but the region became very unstable in the critical part of the British Empire. This is when the British started making decisions that would change the region forever. If you want to find out why the Middle East is so messed up, it's because of the decisions that the Great Britain made at this certain point. So first the British made a promise to the Sharif of Mecca, Husseini, who was a rebel in the Ottoman Empire, and encouraged him to attack the Ottoman Empire. And in return, the British said they will give him the ability to create an independent Arab state. And this new country would include territories of today's Israel. However, the British were not very honest with the Arabs because they have made a secret agreement with the French to divide the Ottoman Empire between themselves, and the territory of today's Israel was to be under British, French, and the Soviet Union jurisdiction. Check out Sykes-Picot Agreement to find out more. But if that wasn't enough to cause problems, the British have also promised this territory to the Jewish people. In November 1917, so before even the British start to govern Jerusalem, they release a document called the Balfour Declaration. And in this document, we can read that the British government views with favor the creation of a home for the Jewish people in the Holy Land. Of course, this declaration turbocharged Jewish people to return to their homeland. And as expected, the Arab people were saying, wait a minute, you promised this to us. What's going on here? So, to sum up, the British promised the same piece of land to the Arabs, to the Jewish people, and to the French. No wonder that this situation caused a lot of confusion, anger, and tension. The British were, however, successful on the military front. They were able to defeat the Ottomans, and in December 1917, General Allenby enters Jerusalem. What happens next is very important and shapes the situation in Israel, and is also an answer why the West Bank is called the West Bank. The coalition of the German Empire lost World War I to a coalition of Britain and France. The result of World War I had a huge impact on the situation in the Near East because the Ottoman Empire basically ceased to exist. And basically, after the Ottoman Empire has collapsed, all this territory you can see here in yellow was to be governed by Britain and France. After World War I, the British and French once again started drawing up borders, ensuring their influence in the Near and Middle East. The borders were different from the Sykes-Picot Agreement that the British and the French secretly planned during World War I, but not by much. Many of the countries that were created after World War I shaped their borders around the British and French mandate. But the area that really interests us right now is over here, because that's the territory of today's Israel. And the British controlled this territory for over 20 years. And only after World War II, this territory was divided and Jordan received its independence. But the territory we know as Israel today was still under British control. However, by that time, on the territory of the British Mandate, you had a very mixed community. The Jews owned a lot of the land which they bought from the Ottoman Empire or the local Arabs, and you also had an Arab community, which some of them have been there for a long time, and others have emigrated from other parts of the Ottoman Empire. However, both communities, the Jewish and the Arab, were not very happy about the current state. because none of them had a state, a home. It was all controlled by the British. Both groups demanded independence from the British Empire. After all, this is what the British promised to the Jews and to the Arabs. The problem was they promised it in the same place. When the British realized that this is a mess, they decided to leave and have the United Nations take care of it. And the outcome of that was a partition plan of 1947 between the Arabs and the Jews. This partition plan divided the British mandate and made Jerusalem an international capital of the land. The Jewish people were quite happy about this partition plan and accepted it, but the Arabs rejected it. And it's not so much that the Arabs within the land that have rejected this proposal, but it was rejected by the newly created countries around Israel that formed the Arab League of Nations. Now, Israel seized the moment. Israel knew it's a 1 in 1,000 years chance, and they announced their independence. Now, the Arabs were not happy about this state, so they decided to deal with the Jews themselves. So first they told the Arabs living in the land to escape so that they won't be caught in the fire and just wait until Israel is destroyed. Till today, many of those Arabs still live in refugee camps because the Arab states won't accept them. You would think that with all that time and money that the Arab states have from oil, they would provide those refugees with a citizenship and homes. But no, they didn't. They didn't because they want to keep that problem and blame Israel for it. Anyway, what happened next is that the Arab states attacked Israel with the goal to basically throw all the Jewish people into the Mediterranean Sea. The plan was basically another Holocaust on the Jewish people. But as we know, that didn't happen. And the Arab states, the 5 countries that attacked Israel, actually lost this battle. And after the war, Israel actually controlled more of the land than it was proposed by the United Nations. Another outcome of this war was that Egypt started to control Gaza, which we talked in the beginning of the video, and Jordan annexed the territory which often today is called the West Bank. So finally I can answer this question, why the West Bank is called the West Bank. And of course I could just give you the answer right away, but if I did that, you would not understand the whole context of this territory and who lives there. So the West Bank is called the West Bank because it's on the west side of the river Jordan. By the way, this is this famous river that is shouted all over the world, from the river to the sea. So when people are shouting from the river to the sea, it means from the river Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. So basically what they are saying is that they want to do to the Jewish people the same thing that the Arabs wanted to do in 48, when they attacked Israel from all sides. Anyway, after the War of Independence, which the Arab states called the Great Tragedy, Jordan was controlling the West Bank. But you see, Jordan was not happy controlling all this territory called the West Bank, because it consisted of a lot of refugees and they were making a lot of problems for the Kingdom of Jordan. Jordan basically wanted to freeze this problem until there will be another encounter with Israel. Israel will be defeated and the refugees will go back where they came from. But the refugees and the Arabs living in the West Bank were really not happy with this situation. They were waiting and nothing is happening, so they decided they will start doing something themselves. This is when the PLO is created, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and a famous person steps up to the stage. Yasser Arafat. Now, to understand what happens next, we have to talk a little bit about Israel's geography. And for that reason, I have created a 3D model of the map of Israel. And what is important to know is that when Israel established its independence, it was heavily dependent on the water coming from the mountains in Syria. This water travels from those mountains to a huge reservoir called the Kinneret, which is also called the Sea of Galilee. Now, Israel understood that the survival of the country depended on this source of fresh water. Israel does not receive a lot of rainfall because it's the Near East and it's very, very warm most of the time. And water is like gold in Israel. That's why in the 30s, even before the creation of Israel, Jewish people began a huge project of building a waterway that would distribute this water from the Kinneret, from the Sea of Galilee, to the whole country. Okay, but you may ask, what does this have to do with the PLO, this whole water thing? Well, let me explain. One of the first attacks by the PLO was on the water carrier in Israel. Israel was very quick to respond to that and prevent the destruction that would affect the whole country. But that was just a sign of what was coming on a much larger scale. But that was not a random attack. You see, the PLO Fatah wanted to force the Arab countries to begin a full-scale attack on Israel. But at that time, Lebanon and Syria had their own plan to cripple Israel. They were working on diverting the waters of the mountains of Hermon from the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, to a dam they were creating on the Jordan-Syrian border. And unfortunately, this shows you a little bit of the mentality of the Arab people. You see, if that plan worked, it would not only be very problematic for Israel because of the lack of water, but also the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, would disappear. Can you imagine this beautiful place, important not only for the Jewish people, but also billions of Christians, would just disappear. Fortunately, Israel was quick to react and treated this whole plan with bombs, and that was effective in stopping this crazy plan of the Arab nations. The Israeli reaction, however, was another factor that caused the Six-Day War, and from that moment the Arab nations were preparing for the final battle with Israel. But before I will move on to the Six-Day War and how the borders changed, I want to come back to the PLO, Fatah. You see, since its creation, the Fatah PLO was a big problem for everybody, especially for Jordan. You see, formerly Jordan, after the War of Independence, was in charge of the so-called West Bank. But now you have this independent organization that didn't want to really listen to Jordan. They had their own ideas, like the attack on the water carrier in Israel, and they were starting to do their own politic. And if that wasn't enough, the PLO started to really threaten the crown in Jordan. They were saying that they are the people, the power is in the people, and the Jordanian king is not helping the Arab people. So King Hussein actually hated Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO. He understood very well that Yasser Arafat is a snake that will bite if you show any weakness. And the culmination of this conflict was a regular war between the PLO and Jordan, where the king of Jordan was almost overthrown. If you want to find out more about it, maybe I'll do an episode about it, check out Black September. But for now, let's go back to the Six-Day War. So the Six-Day War was a very important event where basically Israel defeated all the Arab armies that attacked Israel in 6 days. That's why it's called the Six-Day War. Not only Israel was able to defend itself, but it gained significant territories. So, after the Six-Day War, Israel not only controlled Gaza, the West Bank, but also the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights, the mountains that are very important for the water supply that we discussed before. To have peace with Egypt, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula. But Israel did not give up the control of Gaza. Only in 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza. Israel did not give back the control of the Golan Heights because it was very important for the water supply, and Israel was controlling most of the territories within the West Bank, so Samaria and Judea. So basically, this is the situation that we see today. And this gives you a better understanding of the West Bank, so Judea and Samaria, and who lives there. So we talked about people living in Gaza that are controlled by Hamas, and now Israel has a war with them. This is group number 1. Then we talked about why the West Bank is called the West Bank and who lives there. So you have refugees that were encouraged by the Arab nations to leave Israel, and also the local people that lived there. And they formed an organization called PLO, now it's Fatah. But before I will do the summary of this episode, I want to talk about the third group that we did not mention and is very important. And this group are Arabs that are living in Israel, have Israeli citizenship, and can enjoy the life in Israel. And as you can see on the chart, it's a significant group. It's about 21% of all the people that live in Israel. Some of them are Muslim, most of them are Muslim, but there are also those that are Christian, and as you can see also, there are other religions in Israel. And the Arab people even have the representation in the Knesset, so the Israeli parliament, so they can vote and be represented in the Israeli government. And what is funny about this is that if you would ask the Arab people that have an Israeli citizenship, would they rather live in any of the neighboring Arab countries, they would certainly say no. They want to live in Israel. Because in no Arab country they would have so much freedom for education, medicine, everything. So to answer this question, why nobody wants the Palestinians, the better question is, which Palestinians, which Arabs? Because not all of them are in the same situation. In Gaza, we have Hamas, that it's a radical terrorist organization that nobody wants. Have you seen the wall that Egypt built on the border with Gaza? Egypt is so afraid of Hamas that it built a much bigger wall that America can ever dream of on the border with Mexico. Then we have the Arabs living in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, that nobody wants. No Arab nation wants them. And Jordan actually is very opposed to taking them in because they know of the threat from the past. And lastly, we have Arabs living in Israel that have Israeli citizenship. And they also wouldn't like to live in another country. So I hope this gives you a perspective on the situation in Israel. And I hope that you can now see that those protests against Israel, Palestine will be free, are really meaningless if you don't understand this perspective. This is a very complex issue. I wanted to explain it in the most simple way as I could, and of course I could expand so much, and it already took me half an hour to just get the basics. But I hope this video was helpful for you, and I hope this may be a tool for you where you can oppose those that shout from the river to the sea, because it's basically shouting, get rid of the Jewish people. So thank you so much for your attention. if you watched this video till the end, I am very proud of you. Let me know if in the comments that you have watched this video till the very end. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. I will have more materials in the future. Hit that bell button to be notified. And also, if you think this kind of content is helpful, is good for you, you like it, please consider supporting me through Patreon. This is really the best way to support me personally and the channel. And this is the most stable way for me. So thank you already everybody who is supporting the channel. You guys are great. You are enabling me to continue to do this kind of content on this channel. So if you would like to support the channel, I will leave a link in the description of this video. It's very easy. You don't have to be worried about it. Many people have done it. You don't need to be scared of it. It's just a simple way to support the channel. So I wish you all the best. Have a great day and shalom.